Mordecai said unto Esther, think it not strange that you are in the kingdom for such a time as this. I am Pastor Patricia Henry of Stepping on the High Waters, and I'm here to declare to you and I that this is your time to step on the high waters for such a time as this.
Today we continue with our teaching entitled Run in Your Lane. Somebody say run in your lane. Run in your lane. Run in your lane. We began this teaching last week, and I had the opportunity to listen to the replay on our YouTube channel. And I must say that I was blessed. Was anyone blessed by last week's message? If you have not listened to it, go back onto our YouTube channel and you could find Run in Your Lane. Part 1 is implied. And you could hear the foundation of where we will take off from today. And as we move forward in this teaching, we will do a little bit of a recap to catch up those who need to be caught up, so we all speaking the same language. When the Holy Spirit gave me this title of Run in Your Lane, immediately my mind started to envision an athletics track. My mind started to think about an athletics track where track and field events takes place. I mentioned to you last week we are from Trinidad and Tobago. In the Caribbean, track and field is a big deal. Like, there's a reason why we have so many good runners on the international circuit. It's because we love to run. I think we mentioned last week, we believe why running is such a favorite pastime for us in the Caribbean is because you don't need anything to run. You just need the 2 feet. Many of us grew up running on grass. Then there's different tracks you could run on, etc. But nonetheless, you don't need much equipment, and this is why we probably love to run. We love to watch the Olympics, World Championships. We like to watch the Diamond League. We like to watch Carifta Games that just concluded. We just like to watch athletes run. And show me slide 2. When we think about an athletics track, we see on the floor, on the ground, that there are lines. There are lines that demark the different lanes. You could see also that at the starting position, this is the 200 meters event from the London 2012 Olympics. You could see different numbers, 6, 7, and 8. These and even on the athletes on their thighs, you could see 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. It demarks the lane that they're running in. And those lines on the floor, on the ground, are supposed to be guidelines for the runners. They are trained to know, especially in the sprints, in the short form races, they are trained to know I must stay within those 2 lines throughout the entire course of my race. Why is that important? Because in track and field, there are a subset of races, not every single race, but there are a subset of races, especially the sprints, where staying in your lane is a major rule that cannot be violated. And if you do come out of your lane, even if you step on the line, you are called for a disqualification. You are called for disqualification, or a DQ for short. Running in your lane is really a reminder that God gave you one life to live. God has given us one life to live. Anybody has 2 lives? No, there's no 2 lives. And honestly, I don't know how I would feel having another life. This one is already challenging enough. I have enough problems in this life. God knows I don't need another life. On this earth, at least. This is it. I'm going to cherish it. After this, we're going to do this thing in heaven. Until God comes back, bring us all back to earth after a millennia to rule with him. And has nothing to do with anyone else. So God has given us a life, and our lives, our individual life, has nothing to do with anyone else. We are placed on this earth to do exactly what God has called us to do. And even if someone comes into your life and they mean well, if their advice, assistance, if their help does not align with God's plan for your life, then we have every obligation to interrupt them. Let me say that again. Because God has given you one life to live, everyone who you encounter, family, not family, a partner, co-worker, manager, neighbor, whatever it is, whoever they are, their role is supposed to work in conjunction with God's plan for your life. And anyone who does not have or who does not work in conjunction with God's plan for your life, you have an obligation to put them to the side. And notice I said obligation, not a right. An obligation means you have a duty. You're legally bound, you're morally bound to tell that person, step aside. And many of you have known that you're in relationships, whatever the type of relationship is, and at some point you get the self-awareness that this person does not have my best interest at heart. It's time for me to put this person to the side. You don't have to wish bad at them. You don't have to wish ill on them, Sister Land. You just don't have to answer your phone when they call. If they show up to your house without calling before, organizing before, you just don't answer the door. I've done that. I mean, the blinds open, the lights on. You could tell that somebody's in the house. I'm not answering the door. You just showed up. You're not delivering a package. So you expect me to come out the house and engage you. No, you didn't call. You didn't send a note. You didn't give me the courtesy of telling me you're on your way. So you'll see us in the house and you'll just move on. Could be disheartening. And then there's some of those we just tell straight up. Right now, you're not good for me. You're not good for my life. And we have an obligation. And we learned that your life was tailor-made for you. Your experiences were tailor-made for you. The good experiences, the bad experiences, and the ugly experiences. I mean, I wish I could tell you here as a pastor, I could stand in this pulpit and say that in God's plan for your life is only good things. I wish to tell you that, in your life, when God comes into your life, from that point go forward, nothing bad will ever happen to you. But if I do that, then I'll be misleading you and deceiving you. And one thing Apostle Leah and I committed to each other and to God when we started this ministry is that we will never use this pulpit that God has given to us, this platform, with the intent to deceive. And it is deceitful to say that when God enters your space, only good things happen. Your opportunities, both the quality of them and the timing of them, were already preordained by God. You can't judge your life by how it compares to someone else because they have their own lane to run and you have the same. You know, when you look at this race, you really can't be focused with who's on either side of you. We gave the example, one of my favorite races is the 200-meter sprint. Because in a track, it goes in a circle, and every outer lane is longer than the inner lane, which means that they have to stand up at a stagger. As you see, they're all staggered. I think it's a couple meters each. You cannot run your race thinking, I must run faster than the man in front of me when he has the same distance to run. Because how many times have you seen it where someone takes off, especially in a 400-meter, they take off with all their might and all their speed, and they're way ahead of everyone. And by the time they get to the final stretch, what happens? The people walk them down. Why? Because you mismanage your energy. Why is that? Because you have to realize that you have your own race to run. You cannot be bothered with other people's, with people in the other lane. So we asked a question last week. How do I ensure that I run in my own lane? The first point that we had last week was we have our own race to run. Our lives is a race. we have our own race to run. Our race is not for someone else. Even if you have children, our race might include our children, but we can't run our children's race for them. The Bible says, train up a child in the way that he should go, so that when he's old, he won't depart from it. It means that there's going to be a point in time when they're old enough, they have to run for themselves. So we have our own race to run. What else? Accept that God is in control of my life. Accept that God is in control of my life. When we trust God like this, then anything we encounter won't make us feel like we have to abandon ship. And, so many of us, we get into difficult times, difficult situations, difficult circumstances, and we start to wonder, wow, is my life really meant to amount to anything? Sometimes we wonder, man, is this how my life going to end? Sometimes we have to settle in our minds that maybe it wasn't meant for me to do X, and it wasn't meant for me to achieve whatever I dreamt. The dreams that I had wasn't meant to be a reality. After now settle for what I believe my life has to offer. And when we understand that God is in full control of our lives, we must then declare to ourselves that, hey, God knew that the challenging days will come. Which means that once I trust in God, it is God's responsibility to figure it out. Apostle Lee and I, if we go out for dinner, or we go out on a date, or we go somewhere, Apostle Leah could leave home with just her phone. She'd have to carry no purse. She'd have to carry no card. She'd have to carry no wallet. She'd have to carry no money. Why? Because Apostle Dion has it. She could sit down and order whatever she wants and eat the food in the restaurant because it is my responsibility. She has put her trust in me that when we left home, Dion will take care of it. She has to ask me if I have my wallet. I don't have to ask her. But it's the same thing with God. When we go through this life, we have to understand we do what God has called us to do, then it is God's responsibility to deliver on the goods. It sounds strange. It sounds weird. It sounds, like if we put in a demand on God. Well, the truth of the matter is yes. If I trust God, then I expect God is going to come true with what he said in his word. If I do what God has called me to do, then I expect that he'll bring the provisions. If I believe God, then I expect that he gives me healing. If I have trained up my child in the way that he should go, even if he or she is not walking the way how I perceive they should walk, then I believe God is still doing something in their lives. And then what else did we learn about ensuring that we could run in our own lane? Comparison will result in us stepping out of our lane. We cannot be preoccupied with the race that others are running because it can cause us to lose focus and stumble out of our lane. If all we think about is how my neighbor is doing or how my friends are doing or the fact that all the people in my peer group that we came out of high school together, we came out of college together, everybody married and have children, and I still here trying to figure life out. People who you went to school together, they're all doing big things, they have big house, they have big job, and you still trying to figure yourself out. And we start judging our lives based on how other people are doing. God says that's problems because I called you to run your race. They are running theirs. We cannot be preoccupied with how other people are doing because it will cause us to stumble. And in today's installment, we are talking about staying true to yourself. Somebody say staying true to yourself. 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 One of my life's passions is helping people realize their self-identity, which can be defined as the recognition of one's potential and qualities as an individual. Particularly in young folk, but I'm realizing as I get older, we assume that only young people have difficulties seeing themselves a certain way. And then as you get older, you realize that there are people who are much more mature in age and have the same mindset. You remember how we used to feel going to school? And they always have people who goofing off and silly and not doing their work and be like, teacher will say, if you do that, you will never amount to anything in life, etc. Then they get to the job and there are people who just like that. People who are goofing off, they won't do their work. They say they will work, but they're not working. They come late. And as soon as they come, I remember when I before I moved to the States for college, I did a job for the summer at a place. And there are people who would get to work late. Late, Sister Landa. You're supposed to be in the office at 8 o'clock. 8:15. 20 past 8, you're now walking in. And when you're walking at 20 past 8, you're saying, who are doubles? I'm going on a doubles run. Or you get to the office, we get to the office, supposed to be the office at 9 o'clock. And as soon as they come, it's like, anybody want Starbucks? And it's like, bro, you're late. You should have organized your Starbucks before. But when you do that, you bring attention. Or they're already late, but they're huddling by people's cubicles. How it works, but typically how it works. If you're huddling and you're hanging out and the boss walk past you in the hall, one time, all right, maybe the boss walk past you in the hall again a second time. By that time, I'll be like, hey fellas, I gone. Because it doesn't matter what you're talking about. The perception is you're hanging out. And we used to think young people had a problem seeing themselves the right way. Because they used to tell us that. All the young people, now I'm 42, I'm in the bridge between young and old. And I realize that humans are humans. We all have the same mindset. And unless you release yourself from that thinking, you'll take it to the grave. So particularly young people, your young folk, you can only begin to pursue purpose and destiny only after you have come to terms with who you are. You must come to terms with who you are. And when you come to terms with who you are, then and only then can you become truly focused on running after your purpose. I could never be all that God has called me to be unless I am fully self-aware of who He has called me to be. So I can't be who God called me to be unless I know who God has called me to be. Sister Landa says, Apostle Dion, meet me on Tuesday at 5 p.m. And then she just drives off. I could never meet you on Tuesday at 5 p.m. if I don't know where to meet you on Tuesday at 5 p.m. It just doesn't make sense. And the truth of the matter is, many of us are ambling through life, running this race that God has called us. We are getting older, and we still don't know why we exist on this earth. We still don't have no reason why we exist on this earth. Anybody ever, those of us who have, who are immigrants, we've moved away from our homeland, and every so often we visit, and we have some cousins or some, people who used to go to school with or people who you grew up with. And when you go back home, they're doing the same thing. Like, how are you doing the same thing? Huh? How are you doing the same thing that we used to do 20 years ago? The same location, the same corner. We're hanging out doing the same thing. If you are unaware of who God has called you to be, there is no purpose that will drive you to do something to get there. So if I have to run in my lane and not be sidetracked, then I must be able to answer these two following questions. Who am I? Who am I? And why was I put on earth? Why did God put me here on earth? And I want us to take those two questions home so that we can think about it. Who am I? If you say, who am I? My name is Dion Duncan. Okay, I'm from Trinidad. Okay. But who really am I? What is my purpose? Why do I exist? Am I fulfilling the destiny that God has called for my life? Is this where I am currently part of God's plan? Am I in or out of alignment of God's promises for my life? So let's turn to the scriptures. 1 Samuel chapter 17. And in this we'll explore David's encounter with Goliath. More specifically, the lead up to his encounter, to demonstrate how staying true to yourself is an important factor in running in your lane. Remember, we said you have to focus. You can't be bothered with other people when we talk about running in your lane. So if I'm running in my lane, I have to know who I am so that I don't get sidetracked by the distractions that come. So in 1 Samuel chapter 17, the Philistine army shows up outside of Israel. And there's a valley in between. I forget the name of the valley, but it mentions it in verse 1. And on one side of the hill is the Philistines and this guy called Goliath. Now, even to this day, when somebody says a Goliath or they use Goliath as a reference, they're talking about somebody who is big, tall, larger than life. Okay? So Goliath was supposed to be, they say, over 9 feet tall. He and his brothers were giants. And the Philistines presented Goliath as their champion. And on the other side of the valley, the Israelite army, which includes David's brothers, were standing there listening to the threats from the Philistines. And David's, as I mentioned, his brothers were soldiers and they were off to war. And Jesse, David's father, asked David to take some supplies to his brothers who were on the front lines. And when David gets to his brothers, he realizes or he understands or comes to the understanding that for 40 days, Goliath is threatening them. 40 days. They're terrorizing the Israelite army. And he's calling out for someone to fight him. So we're going to read from verse 8. Verse 8. And it reads, Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. So for 40 days, the Israelites stood frozen, watching this bully. And anybody ever, you know what a bully is. A bully believes that they are bigger and stronger than everyone. And they stand behind their what's the word? Their bravado stands behind their belief that they are bigger and better than everyone else. I like to watch boxing. I like to watch UFC, Ultimate Mixed Martial Arts Fighting. And there's always some guy who is bigger and stronger and think they're so good. And there's always a term limit in how good you can be. Then there's always somebody who comes into the picture, and you think that just because you're the big bad champion, nobody else could ever contest you, and then they get the shock of their life. Many times in sport, we will hear things like David conquers Goliath. We just watched March Madness on NCAA, and they always use those terms when someone who you least expect defeats someone who you expect to win. And for 40 days, Goliath presented himself as a chief destroyer. And while I was studying this, I was going to read the entire introduction to this chapter, but the Holy Spirit nudged me because I almost missed out on something very important. And this is the first point for us today when we're talking about running in our lane, but staying true to ourselves. Point number 1. Just because nobody has ever done it, doesn't mean it can't be done. Just because nobody has ever done it doesn't mean it can't be done. By the time we get to the end of the story, we will see that David won the battle for the Israelites. But what inspired him to act? There was no template to follow. No one was willing to act. The whole army of Israelites were there. The king was there. The king was in his tent frozen. Surely the army of Israel had their champion soldiers, their fighters. In those days, there were no guns and artillery, and there was just swords and javelins. I don't know if bow and arrows even existed, but definitely javelins and swords. And there must have been a champion fighter. But nobody did anything for 40 days. Nobody did anything about Goliath. Even if they didn't want to fight Goliath, Goliath said they were standing in formation to fight. Why didn't they just fight everyone? And I want you to know that so many of us are called to do things that nobody before us has ever done. Nobody in our family has ever started a business. Nobody in our family has ever gone to college. Nobody in our family has ever gone to whatever, higher education. Nobody in your family has ever traveled the world. Nobody in your family has ever started a church, done a ministry, whatever the circumstances. But just because nobody has done it, Sister Lana, doesn't mean it can't be done. Just because nobody has ever done it doesn't mean that you can't do it. And there's so many times we've encountered people who they would say, you know, I want to do this, but nobody like me has never done it. Nobody in my family has ever done something like this. And we talk ourselves out of doing what God has put in our hearts because there's no template before. Do you know how many people are guilty of this? Of not acting through on what God has said? So many people who are living below their potential. So many people trying to fit in with the crowd because we talk ourselves out of pushing hard because no one else is pushing. And I want to declare to us fresh courage and grace, especially to those of us who are hearing this message, who have been afraid to act because the situation feels too big to pursue. You've been prophesied to, and God says you're going to start a business, and you're telling yourself, me start a business? I don't have the money to start a business. God didn't ask if you have money to start a business. He said you're going to start a business. God says, you're going to get a house. I don't have the money to buy a house. But God didn't ask if you had money to buy a house. He says, buy a house. When Apostle Lee and I were looking for houses, we didn't have money for the house. We didn't have money for the down payment for the house. But we started looking at houses. Can anyone tell me how much does it cost to email a realtor and sign up for an open house? How much money does it cost to show up at an open house? $0. How much money? $0 to show up at an open house. How much money does it cost you to browse the internet looking at houses for sale in your desired neighborhood? How much money does it cost to put on something nice? Now, if you're going at looking at nice houses, they'll show up there looking scrunchy. Put on a little slacks, put on a little shirt. And just your mere appearance will make it look like, if you don't have a good car, park the car around the corner and show up. And you always look good when you have papers in your hand. For some reason, when you always have papers in your hand, you look like you're about something. This time the paper have nothing in it. It might just be the listing. And Apostle Lee and I drove every Sunday after church. We used to go to church in Brooklyn. And we used to drive all the way down to Middlesex County because they had good houses down there. We were looking for good school districts for our children. You know, in this here America, you don't just buy a house. You have to think about where children are going to school. What district? Is the district have enough funding? What the taxes look like? Do they have good libraries? Do they have good resources? Because here is based on your location. You go to the school that's, you know, attached to your district. Unless you go private. You know. You won't pick the most expensive neighborhood. And then decide to go private. Then, you know, you didn't choose well. And we used to show up in these people open houses. Sister Landa. No deposit available. no plan for a deposit. And we used to walk around, be like, hi, introduce ourselves, and Apostle will walk around and be like, yeah, we have to move this and fix that, these counters, what material is this? No, you have to change that. And we walking around the people's house, changing things when we don't have even the money to get in. And what we were doing is that we were shaping our minds ahead of time before the money came.
Mordecai said unto Esther, think it not strange that you are in the kingdom for such a time as this. I am Pastor Patricia Henry of Stepping on the High Waters, and I'm here to declare to you and I that this is your time to step on the high waters for such a time as this.